the framework is slowing down to speed up, right? And reading back what you think you heard to make sure that you are answering the right question, right? And only after they tell you, yeah, you got me, now what is your advice? Is really the permission to start moving on in the conversation until that really, and that it's in the title of the card, clarity before feedback, right?
Hmm.
So work on the clarity part. Don't assume that you know what the other person is talking about.
And it's as CEOs and leaders and coaches, it's in our nature to be running very, very fast at 120 miles an hour. So the instinct to slow down and think before acting or responding is often not not front of mind. It's not our primary thought at that point in time. But that's where we've got to make ourselves slow down so that we can actually make sure that we've got clarity on the situation before we give a response, before we give feedback, before we give an answer. It's getting that context that is crucial to be able to handle this particular one properly. Welcome back to CardCast, the podcast where Milan Vavirka and I, we have brief conversations around cards, normally drawn from a deck like these that Milan has put together over the last decade or so. We pull the cards out at random and have a really interesting conversation, a really deep conversation about whatever comes up in the card. Let's shuffle the cards, see what's coming up today.
Oh goodness, clarity before feedback. This card, and I think you called me up on this when we talked earlier. Kind of came out of a heart, out of the heart. It's a heart card, but also out of a frustration, and the frustration with myself, almost embarrassment, because I've been guilty of this so many times, and I do see that in my clients and in the leaders, and that is how we assume we understand something that's being asked of us, and we immediately jump into solutioning without taking that pause of figuring out, am I actually on the right track? And then when you don't find yourself on the right track, you just spend all that mental energy on answering the wrong question, and as a bonus, maybe make yourself look like an idiot. So I've been guilty of this so many times through my career, and I still often catch myself. It's insane. Anyway, that's where the card came from. I think probably I was writing it because there was a recent experience of this, either with myself or with a client. What's your take? What's your experience in that department?
Look, I think we've all done something like this. We all like to think we have the answers. I mean, it's in our nature to be able to solve problems, and particularly if you've run businesses or you've been at a senior leadership level, you probably got there because you were able to solve problems. You were able to give answers that people could run with. People often came to you looking for answers, and sometimes they're not necessarily looking for an answer. They're looking for a validation on something they already know. But if we don't read that signal properly, if we don't actually connect with the real intent behind their request, then we can get it wrong. And I certainly have. Yeah, I mean, I certainly have blurted out an answer that was blindingly obvious, and they've looked at me and thought, "Yeah, got that, done that." That was the first thing we tried. We're several stages beyond that now. So we've also tried this, and this, and this, and this. And it's like, oh, why didn't you tell me? It's like, no, you didn't give me the chance. Okay, right, yeah.
Right, right.
So that, yeah, it's about the context, isn't it? Have you really got enough context from the person who's coming to you to really be able to answer the question from where they're asking it? That's my experience, and yes, I've certainly gone through that. Yeah, and it can be embarrassing for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then just think about the signals you're sending, uh, because if I use your example of, yeah, we tried it, we tried it, we tried it, that's basically in a guy saying, you really think I'm that dumb? Right? So they feel condescended to, right? And that is the better case when you are actually talking to the right topic, because you can be completely wrong, right? You can, I caught myself going one step further, not even letting them finish the question in the first place. Assuming that I know where they're going with it because I've been through that process multiple times and everything like that. And then they had to say, no, 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 wait a minute. That's not what I'm asking you. And I'm like, darn,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, happened to me so often as a leader and even as a coach. I sometimes catch myself, and it's a tough one. It's slightly different topic to what we were talking in the episodes about what do you recommend, or the 131
Hmm.
principles, right, which are more about empowering the other person. Now it's really um, about how do we carry ourselves in the interaction to make sure that we both project the right image, provided the space for growth and learning and all of those things, provided the answer if necessary, but again, the right one, and we don't waste mental energy on the wrong stuff, and God forbid, even damage the relationship, because you can.
That's right, and I think for most people, as they become more and more experienced in business and in leadership, they are coming at this from the position of I've got the answer, I know how to solve this, and at a certain point, you've actually got to stop yourself from doing that, because you're no longer there to give the answers. You're there to coach people into coming up with the answers themselves, or else you end up solving all the problems. And if you're the person that says, right, okay, I've got this, now let me roll my sleeves up, out of the way, out of the way, I've got this, I can fix this, they're just going to let you do it. And all of a sudden, you got everything on your plate. So the dangers of doing this means that everything comes back to you, because people just see you wanting to take it on. And that, as a leader, is where you have to step back. You've got to step back and say, create an environment where, now, if they're coming to you, they're coming probably for validation or maybe a different perspective rather than the answer themselves. Because if they haven't got the answer themselves, then you may have the wrong person.
Yeah, or do you have some work to do growing them,
Hmm.
right? Or
That's right.
getting them to the point where they need to be. But this is a hard card, and hard cards are all about the relationship and the culture and all of those things. And one thing I really notice about them is they often transcend the business area, right? Because if you tell me that this same situation never happened to you at home, I would not believe you.
Yeah, I think that happened yesterday for me.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
this a good opportunity to just go back through the cards and
Oh,
the
sure.
four suites?
Oh, oh,
What do they represent? Because they're obviously different to the playing cards.
yeah. So, hearts, and then really, we are using the suits to represent sort of a thematic blocks, right? Or sort of the type of the card. They are also a true lines of topic, like, for example, delegation, or growing people, or, building out the team, or hiring, and so on, that goes through the deck and sometimes uh, across the suits, because, again, one of my favorite cards, repetition is good, belongs to pretty much everywhere, right? So it finds itself in any topic. And I'm actually working on a map of how those cards relating to each other. It's quite exciting process. But going back to the suits, hearts, relationships, team building, communication, that type of stuff.
Hmm.
Clubs, it's a mindset of the CEO, right? How do you approach problems? How do you find yourself into the best position to deal with it? Spades are systems, process, frameworks, and diamonds are everything that has something to do with value. So anything money related is you find there, or cards that provide a high value impact. So, for example, Daily Huddle is a diamond card. You could make
Hmm.
a case that it's a heart card because it's a culture and accountability, or that it's a spade card because it's a big part of the execution framework. But again, it's sitting in diamonds because of the massive, massive value it brings by just making that small change.
So back to the card. And we've talked about some of the the feelings of when this happened and why people are likely to do that. But I guess it's worth spending little bit time looking at how would you recognize if you're doing this yourself, and having recognized it, what are some strategies or some tactics to actually make sure it doesn't happen again, or how do you avoid this happening? So maybe recognition, how do you recognize when it's happening, and then approaches to not making it happen.
The analogy that's coming to my mind is, the parable or a question. How do you know you're wrong, right? And the answers usually is, how do you feel when you're wrong? Like, I feel embarrassed. I feel like, and and it was in a TED talk, and unfortunately I don't remember the speaker, but she said, no, you're talking about finding out that you're wrong, right? Because being wrong really feels very much like being right, right? There really isn't a difference. So I think that
Mhm.
it's hard to catch yourself doing that while you're doing it, but you have to eyes on the fallout when that happens, to use that as a reminder to yourself and to try to avoid it. But really, the framework is slowing down to speed up, right? And reading back what you think you heard to make sure that you are answering the right question, right? And only after they tell you, yeah, you got me, now what is your advice, is really the permission to start moving on in the conversation. Until that really, and that it's in the title of the card, clarity before feedback, right?
Hmm.
So work on the clarity part. Don't assume that you know what the other person is talking about.
And it's as CEOs and leaders and coaches, it's in our nature to be running very, very fast at 120 miles an hour. So the instinct to slow down and think before acting or responding is often not not front of mind. It's not our primary thought at that point in time. But that's where we've got to make ourselves slow down so that we can actually make sure that we've got clarity on the situation before we give a response, before we give feedback, before we give an answer. It's getting that context that is crucial to be able to handle this particular one properly.
This conversation makes me really think about the art of slowing down. Maybe it should be a card, an episode on its own. It would probably be a club card because it's really a mindset thing. Because we are constantly in a state of urgency of some kind,
Hmm.
right? In
Hmm.
a business, you're always trying to get to the next thing, to the next thing. And again, old saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? We really need to get better as leaders in the art of slowing down in face of the very often actually only perceived urgency, right? Or
Hmm.
construed
Hmm.
urgency. And this is just one of the many examples, right? Uh, we can think through the metronomic systems and how that act of slowing down plays a role in each single one of them, right? In human system, don't hire fast, slow down, do your top grading right? Make sure that your scorecard is in place. Make sure that you have your onboarding plan in place, right? Before you actually bring somebody in. Don't rush those important things because it always comes back and bites you. And whether we're talking strategy, whether we're talking cash, whether we're talking any of the systems, again, the ability and the willingness to slow down the crucial moments just increases your chance of success exponentially, in my experience.
I think there's definitely a card there, and yeah, slowing down. Yeah, I'm sure we come up with a
Okay,
better
I'll
name
make a
than
note
that.
of
But
it right
mm,
now
mm,
before I forget. Like, where are my stickies? The
mm,
art of slowing down. Okay,
mm,
there is a
yeah.
teaser for a future card.
So Milan, for someone who this resonates with, who feels themselves being in this situation in their day to day work, how would you suggest that they go about solving this? How do you suggest that they make sure that they get the complete context before they blurt out the answer or the solution? What tactics would you suggest?
Well, we mentioned it already. I think that the obvious one is the readback. right? This is what I think you're asking me, right? This is what you already tried, right? And this is what you need from me, correct? Am I hearing you right, or am I missing something critical here? Right? That is the simplest and not the easiest habit to get into, but the simplest way to make sure that, again, you're answering the right question in the most helpful way.
I think if you're looking for a template of how to do this really, really well, I'm currently watching The Pit. I'm not sure if you have that series available where you are, but it's an ER series where each season is one day, so it's very, very fast paced. And when you look at emergency teams dealing with critical situations, this is what they're doing. A new doctor comes in and they're asking questions, and they're all getting the context before they then make their next decision or ask the next question. So that's a beautiful, beautiful way to experience that for not for real, but as real as it's going to be, as real as it's going to be.
Oh, fantastic. I think this is the first time we are making a reference to a Netflix series. I think we did some comedy special references before, but I think this might be the first one.
It seemed to me to be the perfect example of how to do this, how to go about doing this. Because if we can't learn from doctors, who can we learn from?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
So if the show is realistic enough, again, I haven't watched it yet, but it sounds like it's like ER meets 24, right?
Well, and there may even be some shared actors there.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
So clarity before feedback. How do you make sure that you actually have the full context before you answer a question or ask the next question? And not doing this often makes you look bad, and it often makes the person asking the question feel a little bit uncomfortable. So this is just a skill that is well worth having in your toolkit. Any closing comments, Milan?
Yeah, actually, you know what? There is one more danger that we didn't talk about, and that is, depending on the cohesion of the team and the level of trust, the person whose question you're answering might not actually tell you that you answered the wrong one, right? They might not actually give you that feedback. You can move on with your day or go on with your day thinking that everything went fine in that exchange. They asked question, you gave them answer, great, right? So if you have any suspicion that this might be happening, then you can do the check, like at the end, is that what you were asking for, right?
Yeah.
Like make sure that there is that feedback loop, not just for the question part, but also for the answer part, right? Is that helpful? Is that what you needed? Did I miss anything? Right? Especially if you feel like they're glazing over, they're like really trying to get out of that room pretty quickly, that might be again an opportunity to slow down, to get more out of the exchange.